So joining me now here inside of Mission Control, the Orion Program Manager, Mark Geyer. Now, Mark, you were working on something else 15 years ago. You were pretty heavily involved in the first launch of Zarya, again, 15-year anniversary today. Real quick, what was your role back then? What were you doing?
So there were a lot of Russian elements. There was the FGB Service Module Progress and Soyuz, and so I was the manager of all those elements and the integration into space station. So I think it was called the Russian Elements Integration Team at the time.
So you had a lot of spacecraft to kind of look after and manage and try not to lose track of. Huh?
Yeah, and we had good element leads for each one. So Doug Drury was actually the FGB manager at the time, so I was over him in that area.
Okay. And, normally I'd start off asking if you remember how you felt back then, the days leading up to launch. But we actually have a clip of you from 1998. Why don't we take a quick look?
So to see a vehicle actually being moved to the pad and you're only a couple days away is thrilling. And I've never been a part of a unmanned launch before, so it's very exciting. So that's really cool. The other part of it is that with Station there are so many launches before your project is complete. So there's still a lot of work ahead, and so I'm extremely excited to get started, and I'm ready to continue the next step, but no, we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us, and that we need to keep focused. So it's kind of a mixed, but it's great to get going, to get started. That'll be great.
So Mark, where were you when that video was taken?
Let's see. I was there was a hotel that Kurnichev owns in Baikonur, and it was we were there for a week, and it was really for the preps. There was a final review a couple days before launch where they needed NASA and Boeing to say everything was good, and if there were any other issues with problems, then we were there to deal with it. So we were there for a whole week. Doug and I and Jack Bacon and some other folks were there, and of course the Boeing folks, Ginger and Scott Wood. We were all there for a week to keep working those issues in case we had a problem.
So you were right there, you were ready, and you actually got to see that launch and see the International Space Station start. From Baikonur. I mean, what was that like? I imagine it had been years of work leading up, and it would be years of work to come, but what was it like, seeing that first element get off the ground?
Yeah, it's interesting now. We look back, I think to look back on that launch, it was exciting just before that, but I think you need to go back and also think about the context of what had happened with Freedom, Space Station Freedom. Freedom passed by one vote after several years of being in development, and then we had it got changed into ISS, and then in about 96, we were in pretty dire straits. The Russians weren't getting the funding they needed. We had some delays on the node in the lab, because it's very hard to build these elements. So there was a time there it was hard to say whether we would even fly. And actually we modified FGB to allow it to have a satellite bus, the ICM, that could dock to it in case the service module never flew. We could still build out the USOS.
Yeah.
We had to modify the FGB. But all that turned around in late 97 and 98, and then once we started flying, it was a whole different feeling. It was a huge relief to get started. And of course, there's been a ton of work since then just to get the station to where it is. So it was a really important moment at that time. And of course, the docking with the node, now you actually had the Russian and the U.S. segments together. And I remember when Cabana and Krikalev actually went through the hatch together. That was a huge moment. It was a lot of fun after all that work to get there.
So being there at the beginning, what was it like to just watch the station evolve over 15 years?
It's funny. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of hard work.
Oh, yeah.
And in the midst of, and I think I actually caught it pretty well there on the video. It's exciting to be the first one, but we were still working hard to get the service module ready, and folks over here were working very hard to get the lab done. There was a ton of work, a lot of late nights, and every flight there was something else, right? And then we had Columbia. We were down for a while. We had to learn how to operate without the shuttle, and then the shuttle came back and we finished the assembly, and then I left around 2005. But it's funny that you're in the midst of this exciting thing, but you're always thinking about, oh, okay, I got to work these next issues because we got this next flight coming
You don't
up.
have a lot of time to be excited.
No.
You're excited for a few seconds when you see it off the ground, and then you're like, okay, well, you know, what's next?
Yeah. There's not a lot of time to enjoy it because you're off to the next thing, but
Mm-hmm.
that's part of working on station.
Yeah. Well, and you'd mentioned, you know, you left station and you moved on to other programs. Now you're overseeing Orion, you know, NASA's next generation space vehicle. It's going to go further than we've ever gone. A lot of really exciting stuff. How important, you know, has the station been in the lead up to this? You know, building vehicles in space, the international partnerships, things like that.
I think there's a couple things that the station's been essential to do right, or to learn from. The obvious one is that it's the most recent development program we've had, and the development program is significantly different than what I would call an operational program, like we were in the shuttle, meaning that the shuttle was hard and there were a lot of issues, of course, especially recovering from the accident. But a lot of the flow, a lot of the subcontractor base was known, so you were working on deltas. It was still very hard to do. But when a development program, you're starting from nothing. You're building up this subcontractor group, you're building on this factory, you're changing your processes. And those of us that are around, I tell people Orion is a lot like Station was in '96. And if people remember what the node was like, how hard it was to get that going, and some of the issues we had in the lab, and that's very similar to Orion. So if you have the experience with it and you've done it, you don't get discouraged. You know, here's the things we need to keep our minds on, and what we need to work hard on. So it's good, really good background. I also think the political environment, people that didn't work on station don't remember that we had a lot of ups and downs. It's hard, and so if you're young and you come into Orion and go, why isn't this easy? Why aren't we just building a spacecraft to go to the moon? Well, the political environment is part of what NASA lives in, and if you've gone through station, you remember that's how it goes, and so you can also say, look, that we've gone through this before, we've been canceled, we survived, and we just need to keep focused on our job. And it helps a lot, I think, to have that background. The third thing would be the partnership. You know, working with the Russians was difficult, but they were terrific partners. And the Europeans as well, the Japanese, Canadians. I had the honor to work with all of those folks. And now ESA is a part of the service, so they're actually building the service module of Orion for us. In fact, Mr. Gerstenmaier and I are meeting with Thomas Ryder here in about 15 minutes. So it's very similar kind of things. We got issues. We have issues that we need to work together. And how do we get through with both of us have different constraints, and how do we meld those constraints and our talents and make the vehicle come together? So in that sense, it's a lot of commonality.
Oh. Well, yeah, station must have been a great learning experience, and I bet you're really looking forward to that first Orion launch, too. You kind of have a lot of the same feelings,
It
I
is,
imagine.
and I can see the team, too. It's great to have that focus of the launch coming up, and that sense of accomplishment, too, and then getting on to the next one. So EFT-1, now that we're on the plan to launch in September next year, right? So 10 months. It's the same kind of excitement after all that time, after all the struggles, to about seeing the vehicle coming together. Overcoming obstacles, technical and others, and about to fly is a very similar feeling. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Mark Geyer, Orion Program Manager, 15 years ago, Russian Elements Manager for NASA, there when the first Element, Zarya, was launched 15 years ago from Kazakhstan. Mark, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate your insight into the past and, you know, how it's really going to help push the future forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.